Hello everyone, I'm truly glad to be a part of Creative Fest Montenegro and I want to give my warm thanks to Dusan and the organizational team for inviting me. I wish I could be there in person with you, to exchange ideas, to share experiences and feel the energy of being together. But since I'm joining from afar, I'll skip the long introductions and go straight into what I came to share with you today. I hope you will enjoy. So my topic today is culture as a bridge between silence and voice. So let me start by stating that there are moments when culture becomes silence. Not because it vanishes, but because no one listens. The voices of those living on the edge of visibility, the young, the vulnerable, the forgotten, are often lost in the loud rhythm of the world. Yet, I've learned that in that silence, culture breathes most honestly. That's where we find its heartbeat. My name is Milica POPOVIĆ. I come from Kotor, a small coastal city that has always lived between two tides, the one of history and the one of change, between Venetian stone and blue digital light, between memory and imagination. I work as a cultural manager at the Cultural Center Nikola Đurković Kotor and as a teacher of informatics and technology at primary school Drago Milović in Tivat. My life is an ongoing conversation between children and adults, between tradition and innovation, art and technology. And through that conversation I realized something simple but yet essential. Between silence and voice, there stands culture. For me, culture isn't a program, a festival or a season. It's a shared space, a living ecosystem of people, of emotions, memories, and small acts of belonging. When I first joined the Cultural Center, I thought our mission was to create events, but over time, I understood that our real purpose was to create spaces. Spaces where people who usually remain invisible could finally take part. So when children from remote neighborhoods walk into our theater for the first time, that's culture. Or when a person with a disability can move freely in our halls, that's culture as well. And even when an elder visitor brings their grandchildren and say, I used to come here too, that's culture. So every cultural policy that fails to hear silence creates emptiness. And that thought became a compass for everything I've done ever since. Joining the European Network of Cultural Centers, or the ENCC, opened a new chapter for me. I realized that across Europe, from small villages to capital cities, we all share the same question. How can culture empower communities to stay human in times of change? In September of this year, Kotor hosted the ENCC General Assembly and Conference Against the Tide. It gathered more than 100 cultural professionals, educators, artists and activists from all over Europe. For those 3 days, the city turned into an open stage for dialogue about participation, ecological responsibility, youth voices and digital transitions, as well as support. It wasn't just a conference. It was proof that a small city can stand tall in the European conversation, that we can lead not by size but by sincerity, that solidarity can be louder than hierarchy. Running in parallel with the conference was the Bold Youth Exchange, which brought together young people from across Europe to Kotor for 9 days of creative collaboration. Their task was to imagine culture through their eyes, through storytelling, digital media, and intercultural dialogue. And they did. They discussed identity, activism, climate change, art, and belonging. They reminded us that youth are not the future audience. They are the today's voice. Bold gave the ENCC conference something irreplaceable, its young sound. And every panel, every workshop echoed a sense of purpose that only youth can bring. Boldness without fear, curiosity without cynicism. So those days made it clear to me that intergenerational dialogue is not optional. It's the essence of cultural sustainability. Parallel to my ENCC work, I have the honor of serving as a member council representative of the Europeana Network Association. Europeana is a community that connects thousands of cultural professionals, museum curators, librarians, educators, and technologists who believe that the digital culture must remain human-centered. Europeana turns heritage into data, but what gives the data meaning is emotion. In the age of artificial intelligence, algorithms can generate images or music, but what they can't generate is context. They can't replace the moment when a person recognizes their grandmother's handwriting in an old archive or hears their language preserved in a digitalized song. And digital transformation in culture is not just about accessibility. It's also about dignity. It's about ensuring that every voice, even in pixels, is heard, understood, and respected. And that is why I often like to say that heritage without humanity is just storage. But when it's shared with empathy, it becomes a living conversation. I would also like to point out the project Kotor Legends Teuta that was born from the desire to bridge the local and the universal. I started collecting legends about Queen Teuta from Montenegro, Albania, Croatia and Italy. Women's voices reinterpreted through generations, shaped by sea, trade and myth. We are building a digital archive, developing a multilingual children's picture book, and organizing storytelling workshops for schools. And through it all, the one question kept echoing. Who tells the story? And whose story is missing? Teuta was a queen who lost the war but never her dignity. She became a metaphor for perseverance. Through her, I wanted to remind children that identity is not about territory. It's about connection. And every time a child says, "Oh, she sounds like someone from here," or "she sounds like someone I know that the legend has crossed the bridge from history into empathy. Another project that beautifully reflects the bridge was Bravo Bravissimo, a Creative Europe project led by Orchestra e Coro San Marco from Italy, with partners from Portugal, Greece, France, and our cultural center of Kotor. It celebrated the legacy of Gioacchino Rossini, not just his music, but his spirit of playfulness and curiosity. Through opera, theater, design, and even cooking inspired by Rossini's favorite recipes, young talents from different countries created an original performance that connected art and life. For Kotor, it was more than an artistic residency. It was a cultural exchange. For local young musicians, singers, and designers, they worked side by side with international peers, rediscovering opera as a language of joy and inclusion. In rehearsals, I often thought that this is how Europe should really sound. It should sound polyphonic, curious, slightly chaotic, of course, but also deeply harmonious. Bravo Bravissimo gave voice to a generation of artists who rarely had access to the opera stage. It proved that classical heritage can be modern, playful, and accessible. Of course, but we need first to allow it to breathe through the new voices, and that's what we did there. Another project that is, so to say, closer to home is a project called Mladi Kotor, or the Youth of Kotor, developed under the Ministry of Culture's national call, Rastimo uz kulturu. It aimed to show that culture is not only what we perform, it's actually how we live. So in that project, we work with teenagers, combining creative workshops with lessons about empathy, inclusion, environmental awareness, and solidarity. Idea was simple: teach culture not as a subject, but as a value system. And they really learned that when you help a friend, or when you respect the difference, when you care for the environment, is when you are actually already practicing culture. I often say that culture begins where ego ends, and in every simple smile or every shared story, you can see a small piece of that truth. Years before all these projects, I like to point out that is something dear to me, is that I served on the organizing committee of Montenegro's Pride Parade. And that experience shaped me profoundly, because it reminded me that culture is never neutral. It either includes or excludes. Working on parade was about courage. The courage to stand, to be visible, and to demand the space in a society that often pretends not to hear. Since then, every program I organized or designed starts with one question: who is not in the room yet? Whether it's a child with autism, an elderly woman living alone, or a migrant who doesn't speak our language, culture must open the door for all of them, because culture that doesn't embrace diversity isn't culture, it's performance. Sometimes, when I walk along the Kotor Bay after a long day, I like to think about how culture feels like the sea. It has the calm days, it has storms, but it always, always, always finds a way to connect shores. So for me, culture is a bridge between silence and voice, between what is visible and what is yet to be seen, between those who have power to speak and those who are still whispering their first words. And our role as cultural workers, as educators, parents, and citizens is to keep that bridge alive, not by making it perfect, but by keeping it open. Because once a community learns to listen to its own silence, it never loses its voice again. Thank you all for listening to me. I hope this was inspiring and useful, and I would like you all to give me some feedback or even to connect for some future collaborations. Here you can see my information, and I wish you all a fruitful rest of the day. Bye.